Here's Miffy again, reading yet another story. Fourth one of the day. This one is going to be fairly long. No idea exactly what it's about, but here we go. Title of the story is The Girl in the Log. Trigger warning, there's sexual abuse in it. Whoopee. Kind of long, but let's get started. I always hated visiting my grandpa's old cabin. That might make me seem spoiled or ungrateful. What kid doesn't enjoy seeing her grandpa? Especially considering he was the only grandparent I had ever known. Both of my parents were killed in a car accident before I was born, and my dad's mom walked out on him when he was very young. He still doesn't know where she is or if she's even alive, so that only leaves my parental grandfather. My parents desperately wanted me to have a good relationship with him. My dad insisted that, although Grandpa was stern and quiet, he really did love me. He just didn't know how to express it. I figured that was probably true, but it didn't change the fact that the trip to his house was filled with idle hours of watching television and reading while he worked during the day. Followed by awkwardly silent dinners in the evenings. I rarely ever saw him, and he seldom spoke in any loving way. He just kept a wary eye on me, like he was waiting for me to break something of his or talk out of line. Still, my parents insisted on sending me to spend a week with him every summer since I was 10, old enough to look after myself for the day. I had visited his isolated cabin in the woods several times before with my parents, but this would be the first time I stayed overnight by myself. There were no kids my age, or neighbors, or of any age for that matter. So I would have to pass the time by reading and watching the few channels he had on the television. This may sound awful for a 10-year-old girl, but I was used to being alone. I was an only child and was always a bit of an introvert. Truthfully, I knew that I probably wouldn't be able to make new friends if I ever had the option. So, on my first day at the cabin, I set out to the woods with a Nancy Drew book tucked under my arm to find a peaceful area to read, away from the musty old person smell of the cabin. After walking for a while, I found a little clearing illuminated by the sun breaking through the trees. I pushed a large oak surrounded by pretty flowers. Behind it was a large hollow log. The whole scene reminded me of a place where the characters in my stories would have their adventures, so I decided to make this little clearing of my own special spot for the next 6 days. I plunked myself onto the center of the log, leaned against the trunk of the oak tree, and begun to read, thinking that I might be able to enjoy my week here after all. I was incredibly comfortable at my new place. The smell of flowers, the hum of insects around me, and the gentle breeze soon had me drifting to sleep, content with the feeling of nature. The wonder was gone when I suddenly woke up, hours later, to find that the sun had set. The moonlight cast eerie shadows on the ground. The trees felt so welcoming during the day, but were now spooky silhouettes against the darkness, bending and snapping in the wind. The insect's pleasant buzz was replaced by a distant howl and a low hoot of a nearby owl. The dry leaves scraped across the forest floor beside me with a rustle that chilled me to the bone. I sat up on the log, rubbing my eyes and attempting to clear my sleep-fogged mind, just as I was realizing the trouble I would surely be in for coming home so late. I heard it. To my left, at the end of the log, I heard a voice say 2 words. "Hello, Ella." I froze. I've never felt so cold, so vulnerable. There was something wrong with that voice. It was too creaky, too low, too dry. I heard the leaves scrape across the ground again, but I felt no more wind. The air was oddly still. The realization suddenly hit me that this creepy, rustling noise was not leaves. It was the low, raspy giggle of whoever had spoken. They were laughing at me. Slowly I turned to the source of the awful laugh and felt my blood freeze at the sight beside me. A little girl crouched at the edge of the log, her cracked and bloody fingernails scraping the dark wood. Her hair was probably blonde, but it was also so slick with dark red blood pouring from the horrible gash on the side of her head. The blood trickled to her gray, bruised face. Her eyes were bloodshot, as though she had been crying for hours, maybe even days. But I could only assume she eventually ran out of tears and decided, instead, to smile. Oh goodness, that smile. A grin stretched unnaturally wide on her bruised face, clashing with the sadness of her eyes, giving her the look of one who has truly gone insane. Her teeth were mostly stained with blood, but the parts that did not were shown white, bright white. She continued to giggle, but it did not part her teeth. She giggled through her clenched teeth and stretched that grin even more as she watched me. She sprang from her crouched position on the ground and perched beside me on the log. The movement was so sudden that I clambered back, crashing onto the soft ground and staring in the wide-eyed terror of the thing above me. She giggled louder at my terror, sounding like the static on the phone, tilted her head over to the left as she observed me. She tilted it so far that I swear I could hear her bones cracking before she spoke. "You're scared," she said, grin never wavering. Her head was still tilted. It was not a question, but I could somehow tell that she wanted a response. I tried to speak, but all that could escape me was a pitiful squeak. Then I did what any child would do, what most adults would probably do in this situation. I peed myself. The creature noticed her awful eyes growing darkness on my jeans and let out a hiss of delight. "Good," she said. At this point, my mind finally gained control of my body, and I managed to get up and run. I got back on the path and was out of there. The girl didn't chase me. She stayed perched on the log like some gruesome bird and continued to laugh. I couldn't get away from that laugh. It didn't get quiet as I ran. On the contrary, it continued to get louder and louder the closer I got to my grandfather's cabin. Only when I reached the yard did it start to fade. By that time, I threw open the door to the house. It was only a whisper. Once I raced through the living room, down the hall, and into my bedroom. It was barely audible. Just before it faded completely away, I heard it say one more thing. So softly I wasn't certain I'd heard it correctly, but she said, "Better lock the door." And from that point, it was gone. No whisper, no laugh. I turned my light switch and slammed the bedroom door, leaning against it to catch my breath. "Where have you been?" a gruff voice demanded behind me. I spun around, thinking for one horrible second that the creature had followed me home, and breathed a sigh of relief when I saw my grandfather kneeling beside my bed. I began to stutter about a dead little girl's chilling grins and evil laughs. My grandpa rolled his eyes and cut me off before I'd formed one coherent sentence. "Whatever, I don't care," he grumbled, climbing to his feet. "Enough excuses, you're home now. But know that you won't get off easy next time. No crazy ghost story will help if it happens again." I was devastated. He didn't believe me. Of course he didn't. He was my grandfather. Definitely none like my mean old grandfather. "Something smells," he gurped, wrinkling his nose and glaring at me. "What's all over your pants?" "Oh, right. I wet myself," I admitted quietly, blushing at my shoes. "When I got scared." "Ugh," Grandpa groaned, disgusted. "I thought you were old enough to be done with that sick crap. Clean up and get to bed. I'm not going through this every night." My loving grandfather then stomped out of the room, ignoring my apologies, and slammed the door. Great guy, that Gramps of mine. Admitting defeat, I changed into my nightgown, clean panties, putting on the soiled ones in the washer. I felt better. As mean as my grandfather could be, he's still an adult who I knew would protect me from whatever was in the woods. After all, the giggling had stopped once I reached the guest's bedroom. I felt safe there. Until I went to bed. Still on the edge, I left the lights on and read a funny book to calm me down. I was beginning to drift off, feeling safe and warm, when I heard the dry, raspy voice say the words I would never forget. "You didn't lock the door, Ella." I shot up and looked out the window. There she was, both hands pressed against the glass, grinning that awful grin, the wide red eyes looking from me to the door, the unlocked door. The giggle was mocking me, celebrating that she would win, even though she gave me a head start. She continued to laugh as I flew from the bed to the door and locked it. As I heard the satisfying click, I heard her croak, "Never forget." It stopped. She was no longer at the window. The raspy chuckle was not heard. I didn't go back to the woods that week. I stayed in the house to watch the news and read. Boring was good. Boring was safe. I locked my bedroom door every night, and every night I woke up to the rattle of someone trying to get up and trying to get inside my room. The doorknob would shake loudly as the creature would grow frustrated with its resistance. The banging against the strong wooden door would shake my bed. I never moved nor made a sound. I waited for her to give up, which she would. The shaking would stop, and I would hear her low, deep breaths just outside the door. Sometimes the breathing would cease after a few moments, and sometimes it would follow me into my dreams. But it was always gone in the morning. Years went by. I continued visiting my grandfather every week during every summer, and I continued to spend the days indoors. Locking the door became a ritual, and I knew to expect the rattling as this creature tried to get to me. It no longer fazed me. Part of the reason for my lack of fear was that I knew that the thing couldn't get past my locked door for whatever reason, but also because I wasn't afraid, because I was fascinated. The incident had sparked interest in the paranormal. I was no longer a frightened child. I was a know-it-all teenager. I wanted to know more about the ghoulish girl. Who was she? How did she know my name? Why did she tell me exactly how to escape her? There came a point where my curiosity outweighed my fear. I had a chance to encounter something few people ever will. I could find answers others would never find. That is why, when I was 15, I made the decision to keep my door unlocked and to confront the spirits. I was an idiot. The first night of my stay that summer, I got ready for bed and closed the door, resisting the natural urge to lock it. I tried to ignore the heavy dread that settled on me as I climbed into the bed. I had made my mind. I was no longer a scared little girl. So I waited. I had no intentions of sleeping that night. I pulled out my iPad and played some games, alert to every creak and groan of the old house. It was midnight when I heard them, footsteps, coming towards my room. This was it. I froze, goosebumps all over my body. My heart began pounding out of my chest. I set my iPod down and watched the door that protected me for so long. The doorknob had slowly turned. I held my breath. The door was opening. This all happened in just a few seconds, but it felt like hours. My door was completely open now, revealing a larger silhouette than I expected. I fumbled the lamp next to my bed, grabbed the thin chain and tugged. Light flooded the room to reveal my grandfather. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The relief was overpowering. There was nothing to fear. My disappointment was that I would not discover the secrets of the dead, pushed aside by my sheer of joy that I was safe. No girl stood before me. It was only my grandfather, smiling at me the way he never has before he stepped into my room. "Grandfather, you scared me," I laughed, pushing my hair back with shaking hands. "You left the door unlocked for me," he noted, smiling warmly and closing the door softly behind him. "Yeah, I did." I couldn't stop laughing at my own foolishness for leaving it locked so long. "I knew you'd come around, pretty girl," my grandfather whispered, sitting beside me, tucking a strand of my hair behind my ear. "I knew I just had to be patient for you." What was he talking about? "I could have unlocked it myself," he continued. "I have the key, of course. I thought many times about using it, but I resisted. I knew I had to give you the choice to let me in. It's more special that way. I knew you'd come around." But something was off. This wasn't my grandfather. My grandfather was strict and never smiled. He had never had a kind word to say. My grandfather doesn't sit on my bed and touch my hair, and he certainly doesn't run his hands up my thigh like he's doing right now. "Stop it," I cried, slapping his hand away and jumping out of bed. "What are you doing?" A flicker of surprise had passed his face quickly before he relaxed back to the sickly sweet smile. "I won't hurt you. Just come back to bed and we'll take it easy." This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. I felt like I was going to vomit. I wanted something paranormal, something otherworldly, but this was real. This was far too real. Shy all of a sudden? The man on my bed asked, chuckling. Allow me to break the ice then. With that, he grabbed my hand and pinned me onto his lap before I had a choice to react. With surprising strength, he squeezed my arms to my sides and silenced my cries with a crushing kiss. Wow, this story is really not what I expected. Summoning all my strength, I broke away from him and tore out the room. I heard his surprised yelp and his pounding footsteps as he quickly chased after me, but I didn't look back. I hurried out of the cabin, and ghost or no ghost, I was heading for the woods. I wasn't sure where I was going or what was I going to do. I just ran as fast as I could, my grandfather right on my heels, cursing and screeching that I would regret this. I ran, hoping there would be a house on the other side of the woods, or maybe he would trip and break something, or maybe he would grow tired and give up. I just didn't know. We reached that clearing where I had met the little girl 5 years earlier, and I was struck with an insane idea. I'm not sure what I expected to happen. I just knew my grandpa was threatening, and I was desperate to stop him. I raced to the old log, fell to my hands and knees, peering into the hollow darkness within. Help! I screamed, my panicked voice echoing back to me. Please help! It was unlocked. The door was... Two strong hands grabbed my shoulders and whirled me around. I was looking into the lunatic face that I once called my grandfather. His eyes rolled wildly into his head. His thin white hair stuck out at odd angles, and his mouth was twisted into a furious snarl. Panting and heaving, his red face was full of hatred and contempt for me. I saw no love there, no mercy. You, he wheezed, are going to regret. He stopped. I heard something move behind me. His eyes widened in terror as I gaped over my shoulder. With a scream, he pushed me away and jumped back. I fell and backed away, turning towards my savior. Her skin was still gray and her wounds were still bleeding. That impossibly wide grin was plastered across her blue cheeks. Her eyes, however, were no longer sad. They glowed triumphantly as he approached my whimpering grandfather. He stammered, falling backwards and attempting to scramble away, seemingly unable to break eye contact with the dead girl. She chuckled as she watched his horror, giggled louder when she let out a painful cry and clutched his chest. Giggled louder as he fell into his side, clawing at his heart, laughing harder and harder than ever when he turned his head towards the night sky, the life fading from his eyes. I squeezed my eyes shut, my back against a tree, and prayed for it to end soon. It did. The girl looked away. She faded away, whispering one last message. Goodbye, Ella. The next day I called the police to let them know that I had gone for a hike that morning, only to stumble upon the corpse of my beloved grandfather. Some nice officers arrived to comfort me and get my statement before driving me home. The cause of death was a heart attack. Some people thought it was odd that he had been in the woods when he died, but no one questioned too much. It wasn't unheard of for him to take late-night walks. I didn't tell my parents what happened. I didn't think there would be a point. It would only cause more pain. He was dead. That was all that mattered. I even went to help them clean out his old cabin. I was tasked with boxing up the books and pulled out an old photo album off the shelf. I managed to let it slip through my fingers and hit the floor, sending poorly secured photos flying everywhere. Cursing at my clumsiness, I bent down to gather them all. I picked up the photo closest to my feet and froze. It was her, sitting on the porch of my house, holding a baby and grinning a wide grin that was much more pleasant when it matched her eyes. Her skin was creamy and white and her cheeks were rosy. No wound, no spilled blood on her beautiful blonde hair. But there was no doubt. This was the grinning girl I had feared for so long. I hollered for my father and asked who she was. Looking at the photo, he paused for a moment as tears filled his eyes. Well, this is you. And the girl holding you, she's your sister, Abby. She looked at me with a sad smile. "Sorry, kiddo," he said softly. "We weren't trying to hide her from you or anything. It's just difficult to talk about. She died when she was 10. You were barely a year old. We should have told you all this sooner, but we weren't sure how to go about it. At some point, I guess we just decided to let her go. I figured it would come up when the time was right." I could barely register what he was saying. I heard myself ask how she died. "She was playing in these woods out here, running around and having fun when she tripped, banged her head on a log, and died instantly. She was found in the same general area they found my dad." At these words, he broke down in fresh tears. I comforted him numbly, knowing that I would never tell him what I knew in my heart. He never questioned his idea that his daughter was playing happily before she died. It was cruel to tell him that Avi died running away in the terror of the man he called Dad. Nor would he ever know how long her spirit lingered in that place, unable to rest in peace until she warned the sister she knew so briefly of the danger, only leaving once the monster was dead. Looking at the photograph of the smiling girl and who held me so securely in her arms, I could only think of 2 words as my eyes filled with tears. "Thanks, sis." Thanks for listening.